The name Gerald Ponting will be very familiar to most people that are aware of the history of the Calanais Standing Stones. He and his late wife, Margaret Curtis, were largely responsible for elevating public awareness of the site through publication of their book, The Standing Stones of Callanish, which was published back in 1977. The couple's in-depth knowledge and intimacy with the site was unique. But how was it that the job of studying the stones in such detail fell to them in the first place? Well, in the course of their lives, they just happened to have ended up living in the cottage closest to the stones, and the magic of the site seems to have taken them over. The names Gerald Ponting and Margaret Curtis have become inextricably linked to the stones ever since. Gerald Ponting is very much the Callanish man in public perception, but there's very much more to his life. And a full introduction would take up the whole show, so there's a brief biography in the description below if you want to know more. By the way, the interview you're about to see was actually commissioned by the Callanish Visitor Centre to appear on their website, and I'll leave a link in the description to that. Please do pay them a visit. Right, time for me to stop talking. Here's the interview.
Gerald, welcome. It is really so good to have you join us. I'm not going to dither about. I think for a lot of people who don't know you, just tell us who you are and what your connection with Callanish is.
Right, good morning everybody, or good day. Right, I was brought up in Hampshire. I did my first teaching in Suffolk, and in 1970 we went on holiday to the Hebrides and I first visited Callanish as an ordinary tourist. We holidayed in the Hebrides for the following 5 years, in fact, and then a job came up in Stornoway and I got a teaching job in Stornoway, and we moved to the Isle of Lewis. By pure chance, the house which we chose to buy was not much more than a mile from the Calanais Stones. And being the sort of people that sort of interested in their surroundings, Margaret and I, better known since as Margaret Curtis, started investigating, trying to find out what was available. And there was very little. There was no guidebook in the shops. There were bits in the odd tourist guidebook, we got books from the library. We found references. Now, in the long pre-internet days, this research was mainly done by getting photocopies sent from libraries and archives in Edinburgh. And we soon discovered, in less than 2 years, we found, oh, well, there's enough here to make a guidebook. Nobody else has done one. So we wrote The Standing Stones of Callanish, great help from the local printers, self-published book, 13,000 copies in 7 years, and that really financed the rest of our research. Okay. One of the most interesting plans of the site was done by John McCulloch in 1819, and he showed several of the stones as fallen. And various people, including Professor Tom, looked at this and thought, those stones are fallen in 1819, they're not fallen now, somebody's been round and reerected them. Callanish is a restored site. So, in fact, we were able to prove that untrue, because, in fact, Callanish had been enveloped in peat. There's a famous illustration from Henry Callender's paper showing the locals cutting the peat among the stones. And then there's the absolutely iconic image of Callanish in Henry James's book, not the other Henry James, Sir Henry James, Chief of the Ordnance Survey. His book has this wonderful illustration of Callanish with a tide mark on it. All the stones are, as it were, two-tone, with the lower section, the lower 5 feet, a lighter colour, because that is where the peat had bleached the stones. So absolutely proven, all the stones were standing up, protected for centuries, millennia, by the developing peat around the stones. So that was really the first thing. That was included. Our only real interest in archaeology before was watching Callanish with Magnus Magnusson on BBC. Little did we know that we would actually get our own spot on Callanish in 78, because we entered the competition for amateur archaeologists. We didn't win one of the top prizes, but we were finalists. We met the Prince of Wales in London, etc., and we had our own a 6-minute spot on the Chronicle. Mm-hmm. the thing, if you're going around talking to people on site, the thing that really amuses them is stone 19. It's the tallest stone at the north end of the avenue. It was obvious from drawings done in the 1800s that it had some point lost the top. And we measured all the stones. I went up a step ladder, a very clean break at the top. And with that, Margaret said, I think I found the top of that. And she picked up a rock from a low wall and handed it to me. I went up the step ladder. It was a perfect fit.
Oh my Lord.
Some years later, one of the workmen came along, glued it back in place, and there was a picture on the front page of the Stornoway Gazette labelled "Tip for the Top." So if you look at stone 19 now, you can actually tell the top bit has been joined back on. So it always amuses people. Much more significant, stone 33A. Palmer, we know very little about Palmer. In fact, his plan is only available in Edinburgh as a tracing. But the interesting thing is that the east row, all his measurements are correct, we checked them. There's stone 30, 31, 32, 33. Then there's one more stone, 19 feet further on. Fortunately, the other side of the site fence. Croftland occupied by our postman. So we tell the postman about it. He said, let's go and get a spade. No, they're going to do this professionally. Now, I'm not sure the word geophysics existed then, but we did primitive geophysics in that we laid out a 3-metre square grid. We got a metal rod graduated in centimetres, and we probed all across that grid. It was a couple of days that I had a teaching holiday and the children didn't, one February, and this probe went down 20 or 30 centimetres most of the time, and occasionally it just went clunk about 5 or 10 centimetres, and by that means we were able to lay out the shape of the stone underneath there. 3 years later it was excavated when Patrick Moore brought his team up. 2 years after that, all the legalese to move the fence, the stone was re-erected. So if you go to Calanais stones today, there are 48 standing stones, 49 standing stones instead of 48, one of which would not have been found without the documentary research which we'd been doing. So stone 33A dominated my life for 5 years.
Yeah, well, of course. It's incredible, and I'd love to hear all of these stories. I'd love to hear all of these anecdotes, and I'm sure many people out there would love to. So, please, we'd love to have you back to explore, because there's nothing like that kind of intimacy with a place when you live almost on top of it, and you've got that time and ability to examine a place so intimately and in such detail. It's quite extraordinary, quite unusual. The advantage of living locally on the site, knowing the local people. On one occasion, we got one of our neighbours in and spread out this Gallic map and said, can you find some of the place names may help? And he said, oh, that's an interesting one. Now, my pronunciation is something like Drumna Hain Cloicha, which means ridge of the one stone. So we walked up on this ridge, and sure enough, there's a broken, fallen megalith on that spot. We later found it was mentioned in a travel book in the 1930s. Now, this is probably the best example I can give you. One of the things I think you're interested in is about alignments and indications between the different sites. We called that stone, we decided to call it stone 17, Calanais 17. And if you stand there and look in a southerly direction, you will see the standing stones of Callanish 4, and in the distance a very obvious V notch in the Harris Mountains. And when you do the horizon profiles, we did a great deal of this theodolite work, horizon profiles with the camera, doing all the calculations on a programmable handheld calculator long before home computers, and we produced these diagrams. And the diagram there showed the moon at the most southern extreme skimming across the horizon, setting into the Harris Hills,
and reappearing framed in this V-notch. I've not seen it. Margaret and Ron Curtis photographed it in 1987, I believe. So that's one clear indication where a line between two sites and the hilltop really does show this up.
Well, I'm glad you introduced the topic of the moon, because of course I think so many people associate Callanish with the moon, and of course we believe that the last time that the moon at the standstill did its thing at Callanish was in 2006. Can you say a few words about being there at that time and that experience, Gerald?
Yes, I mean, I left Callanish in '84, went back for a holiday some years later, the only time Liz has been up there. And I decided to go back for '06. And obviously we picked a June full moon, hoping to see the moon skimming across the hills, rising out of the body of the Sleeping Beauty, that iconic range of hills that so much looks like a prone woman. And skimming across the horizon, and then watching this moon reappear among the stones of the circle, we hoped. Well, I got some lovely shots of the moon arising out of the Sleeping Beauty about 10 past midnight. Not in exactly the same position as it would have been in prehistoric times because of the changes astronomically. But sadly the clouds came up, the moon disappeared, and we didn't see it. But it was a magic evening. There were a lot of people. The amazing thing is that this idea of the southern moon, Tom had an idea about it. Professor Tom had an idea about it, but he got it wrong because he didn't realise about the rocks to the south of the site. But the diagram that we produced at a scientific conference back in '81. It's been reproduced in so many places, this diagram of the moon skimming across the south. And 1985, hope happening again next year, so hopefully I'll be able to go up there and see it again. Remains to be seen. Can I also say something about...
fingers crossed.
Yes,
we might
indeed. Yeah, might meet there indeed. It'd be great. Professor Tom gave the other sites around here, really, other stone circles, other single stones, he gave them numbers, Callanish 2, 3, 4, and so on. A group of University of Glasgow geographers, University of Glasgow geographers, did a survey, and they found various other sites, and they found a stone up on the hill just above Bracelet, obviously well known to the locals, and named it Calanais XI. But that was not published archaeologically until we put it in Discovery and Excavation in Scotland, saying that we thought it might be the remaining stone of a stone circle. Well, I forget which university team was up there 2 or 3 years back, but they surveyed it, reckoned it was a circle, and there's this very newsworthy item about a massive lightning strike, which so often in the popular press seemed to suggest it was at the main site. But Calanais XI, I won't try and pronounce the Gaelic, it basically means shieling of the large hill.
Yeah.
That particular site is quite and you stand there and you've got a really good view across the whole of the Callanish area. You can see the stones from there. You can pick out the house where I used to live from there.
Yes. Well, so you've mentioned some of the surrounding sites because there's a number of other standing stones and circles in the area. Do you think that those are also orientated on the moon and other celestial events, or do you think they're quite separate?
I think, well, there's all sorts of differences. We don't even know, of course, if they're of the same date. We don't know if there were different communities. So, we worked on the assumption that they would have in some way worked together. The fact that they all have this relationship with the Sleeping Beauty and the Harris Hills. can't. I mean, I did all of this back in 1974, 1984. So delving into my memories, you'd really need to go back to some of our publications at the time, or indeed some of the things that Margaret and Ron did long after I'd left the island. But yes, I think there are indications to be seen there. I think the Callanish 17 to Callanish 4 is the most obvious one, really.
I think that there is so much we could talk about. There is so much depth to this. There's so much complication about the Callanish site, and I think, generally speaking, it probably deserves to be a lot more known.
It deserves to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Yes, very good point.
It's very true.
Absolutely.
There's also a big controversy. There's a big controversy going on right now in May 2024 about whether they should charge to admit. At the moment at Callanish, you only pay to go in the exhibition. You can wander into the site any time of the day or night, which was great. Some of the photographs that I took at the time were dependent on being able to just wander in at any moment. I can understand that with all the cruise ships coming in, now Stornoway's got a deep water port, large numbers of people going, they've got to do something, but the locals are having meetings more or less as we speak, I think, to put their opinion on it. But it'd be interesting also to see the apparently wonderful extensions of the visitor centre they're doing next year as well. So
yes,
lots of things happening.
Yes. As I say,
it's one of the great controversies, really, isn't it, in archaeology, that generally speaking we want people to be more aware of things, but there is the inevitable downside of that you increase footfall to any of the sites, and you can't really have one without the other.
Anyway,
over tourism is news worldwide, isn't it?
For sure, yeah. Hopefully, despite all that, I hope that we, Rupert and I, do manage to get up to Callanish next year. Do a bit of a road trip, and hopefully it'd be an absolute delight if you would be there at the same time, because there'll be lots of interest and lots to talk about. It'd be very interesting to see how much, if at all, the site has changed since in the several years since we were up there, Rupert. Don't you think?
Yeah. I do. Yes. It's fingers crossed for the weather when it happens.
I was losing quite a bit of that. That's the big thing, isn't it? At least now you can get fairly reliable weather forecasts.
True, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, well.
Yes, that's true.
We'll have to keep our fingers crossed. Gerald, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute delight talking to you, and we could probably talk for hours, and maybe we can arrange a moment when we can, a time when we can do that. But for the moment, I think for the purposes of Callanish conversations, our work here is done. So just to say thank you once again. Please.
Could I just put in a plug that I do talks on Callanish and on life in the Hebrides generally, which are available on Zoom. So anyone wants to get in touch with me.
Absolutely, yeah. Do that thing. So
anyway,
that's all.
Thank you both very much. It's been great talking to you, and hope to talk to you another time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gerald. Thank you. Bye-bye now.